The information contained in this episode is for informational purposes only. No material is intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment.
We need a revolution. There's only one solution. I need somebody to show me the love. We need a revolution.
Well, hello. Welcome to episode 377 of Informed Life Radio on 1150 AM KKNW Seattle and streaming live to CHD TV, Rumble, YouTube, and Facebook with replays available on your favorite podcast app. Thank you for joining us. I'm super excited today because I got to come to Bellevue to be at the station with Nathan, and I have a beautiful view out this window and this Blue Angels keep flying by. So extra excited today. I'm your host, Lisa Templeton, and this hour of free speech radio is brought to you by the members of the nonprofit Informed Choice Washington. If you'd like to help us keep the show on the air, please pledge a single or recurring donation at informedchoicewa.org and hit donate. We really appreciate your help. And just a reminder, Stand for Health Freedom has a voter guide for Washington that they've put together. Remember, ballots are due Tuesday, August 4th. And you can go to standforhealthfreedom.com/vote to see their voter guide. Now, remember, Informed Choice Washington doesn't endorse candidates, but we're sharing this research for your consideration. And I would like to welcome our fabulous president of Informed Choice Washington, Bob Runnels, who is co-hosting with me today. Welcome, Bob.
Hi, Lisa. Thanks for getting this interview.
Hey, I know. We're lucky we get to have Dr. Supple back again for the second time on his second book. So let me give an intro. William F. Supple Jr. is also known as Ben Fenn for his research on fenbendazole, I said it right. He's a neuroscientist whose work has focused on brainstem mechanisms of behavior and cerebellar involvement in learning, memory, and emotion. Now, his new book that we're going to talk about today, The Sunlight Solution, Reclaiming Vitamin D, Reversing the Chronic Disease Epidemic, and Making America Healthy Again, challenges the modern fear of sunlight and argues that chronic sun avoidance and vitamin D deficiency are under-recognized contributors to America's chronic disease crisis. Welcome, Bill. Thanks for coming back.
Thanks, Lisa. Great. Excited to be here.
Great. Well, you call this a sunlight solution, not just a vitamin D book. What led you into this subject, and why did you feel this book needed to be written at this time?
Well, like most things that actually matter, I had a problem, my own problem to solve. So the book is a 40-year culmination of a necessity is the mother of invention sort of a situation. So I grew up in Hudson Valley of New York, and when I moved to Dartmouth, which is in Hanover, New Hampshire, it's quite a bit farther to the north, and I started to develop flaky patches on my scalp and on my elbows and on my skin. So I went to the local infirmary for the students, and I was diagnosed with the heartbreak of psoriasis. I don't know if you remember those TV commercials, but psoriasis is a skin disease, and there's no cure for it, and it's an autoimmune skin disease. So I spent 25 years dealing with something that was you can only manage with topical treatments. And basically it was a Band-Aid on a problem that got progressively worse and worse. So what I noticed is when we would go to Florida or in the summer, it would clear up for the most part. So, being a scientist and seeing that 20 times, the 21st time I realized, what is it about going to Florida or the sun or the summer? It's the sun, and I actually thought it was salt water to begin with. So,
that's a fair
Einstein,
hypothesis too.
Yeah, Einstein, I'm not. So I started to become interested in, well, what is it about the sun? Well, it's vitamin D. So I started to look into how viable vitamin D would be to fix the condition. So I started taking high dose vitamin D, and high dose was 5,000 units a day. And within 3 to 4 weeks, my skin cleared up, and it's been clear for 23 years. So that got me started in, even though I'm a neuroscientist, in having an interest in all things vitamin D. So so basically that's the reason why I'm interested in vitamin D as a neuroscientist. So I would read, various articles that would come out, and I noticed that, gee, there's really not as much interest in vitamin D as there should be, given that virtually all of our cells, all 37 trillion cells that we have in our body, have a receptor for vitamin D. So what we've been finding, we've been in a 50-year experiment looking at the sick experiment of looking at the effects of denying those receptors adequate vitamin D, because we've gone through a sun scare that's been lasting since the 1970s. So in the 1970s, we were told that the sun is a villain. The sun will kill you. You'll get melanoma if you spend too much time in the sun. Well, there's some truth to that, but there was no compensatory advice to compensate for what is lost from not going into the sun. So when we go out into the sun, our skin makes vitamin D. So a 20-year-old, if they go out in the sun for 10 or 15 minutes, they will make between 15 and 20,000 international units of vitamin D. You may say, wow, that's a lot, because the RDA is 600. Why is the RDA at 600 international units when our biology is telling us we need these mega doses when we go out in the sun? Well, not to be a conspiracy theorist, but
Okay,
the 600
conspiracy analysts are welcome here.
Yeah, the 600 IU US RDA is basically the minimum amount that you need to keep your bones from crumbling. So it's the bare minimum, the absolute bare minimum. But we have these 37 trillion cells that have a receptor for vitamin D that are going chronically starved. And what we're finding is that the chronic disease epidemic that's plaguing us now. So RFK Jr.'s CDC recently put out a study that said currently 8 out of 10 Americans have some sort of chronic disease now, compared to 1 in 10 back in the 1960s, before the sun scare. So something is going on. And if you look at the epidemiology of the various autoimmune diseases, cancer, other diseases that are related to vitamin D deficiency, they show a north-south gradient. So the farther north you are, the more the incidence of the disease. As you move towards the equator, you get less and less of the disease. There's other factors, but the main elephant in the room is solar radiation. So our skin makes a huge amount of vitamin D when exposed to the sun. I should mention that as we get older, we make less and less. So the 20-year-old example I just gave, for a 20-year-old skin, by the time you're 60, you're only making 25% of that per unit time. So your skin becomes less and less effective at making vitamin D. You may have noticed, like some really old people, they almost have translucent skin where you can see their veins and bones through their skin. Well, your skin thins out as we get older, and it becomes less effective at making vitamin D. So I call it a built-in death mechanism. So what you have to do is you have to counteract that built-in death mechanism by supplementing with vitamin D. So basically, that's what the book is about, is chronicling all the different conditions that are either autoimmune or based on chronic inflammation, showing the role of vitamin D, and then suggesting remedies to fix it, which a lot of times it just involves going outside.
Great, nature.
And that's really the shocking part of doing a book like this on vitamin D in 2026. when it's just such an obvious thing that we evolved in the rays of the equatorial sun. And now we've been telling ourselves that we don't need any sunlight. When we go outside, we have to have sunscreen on, or we're going to die of melanoma. The truth about melanoma is that most melanomas develop in places where the sun doesn't shine. Your armpits, back of the knees, butt crack. The vast majority occur in places where the sun doesn't shine. So how can it be related to direct sunlight? And the prognosis of various melanomas, it's if a person has little to no circulating vitamin D and they get melanoma, the prognosis is very dire. People who have higher levels of vitamin D, or who actually take vitamin D after a melanoma diagnosis, fare much better. So the vitamin D connection in the prognosis of melanoma is very established. And that it's that way for a lot of different cancers as well, that I'm sure we'll talk about later.
And also in your book, you mentioned outdoor workers and their incidence of melanoma compared to the general population.
Right, which is less. So it's counterintuitive.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you don't want to be, I want to be clear, you don't want to go out for hours and hours with no protection and get blistering sunburns, which we all got as kids. I mean, I got a lot of sunburns. But you also don't want to go out. You also don't want to stay inside and be pasty white and stay out of the sun, especially if you have dark skin. You know, if you're Black or Hispanic, you need to, if you don't supplement, you have to go out in the sun for a very long time to generate the comparable amounts of vitamin D that a person with lighter skin will generate. So, there are health disparities that are pretty common between Blacks and whites in the US. And all of the disparities, a lot of people think it's related to socioeconomic status and economic differences, lack of access to care, but it's really not. It's a biological difference. So in the book, I talk about 3 particular maladies that affect Blacks much more often than whites in the US. Cancer, heart disease, premature birth, and the outcome from COVID infections. So it's 4. I added 1 in there. So each one of those conditions, let's take cardiovascular disease as an example. So Blacks have much more a higher incidence of cardiovascular disease, arteriosclerosis, heart attacks than whites do. And one reason is that they make a lot less vitamin D, and Blacks are notoriously vitamin D deficient, much more than whites are. So the average circulating level of vitamin D, it's measured in nanograms per milliliter. In the book, I present why 60 to 100 is ideal. The average circulating level of vitamin D in American Blacks is 14. 14.
And what did you say was the optimal level?
60 to 100.
Okay.
So
And that's optimal, not average or whatever.
The average for whites is about 24. So it's not much higher. Still, we're 8 out of 10 people in the US have a vitamin D level below 30 nanograms per milliliter, and they're vitamin D starved. And if you don't go out in the sun and if you don't supplement, you're going to get sick, because your cells, in particular your immune system, runs on vitamin D. And we can talk about how the immune system works in a minute. But back to the cardiovascular disease. So you have that epidemiological difference, population difference in vitamin D, blood levels in Blacks and whites. The reason why it matters is the root of most chronic disease is chronic inflammation. I'm sure you've heard that before. And what chronic inflammation is caused by is your immune system attacking healthy cells because it doesn't know which is which. So what your immune system does, you're trying to use, it's a very simple idea, but in practice, it's very complex. So your immune system what vitamin D does is balances your immune system reaction between healthy immunity and harmful inflammation. And it's a kind of like a teeter-totter seesaw. And if you have enough vitamin D, you're going to have healthy immunity. If you don't have enough, your immune system is not going to function properly. And basically, the main function of the immune system is to attack stuff that shouldn't be there, that's dangerous to the organism. If you don't have enough vitamin D, it malfunctions because it runs on vitamin D. Our creator designed us such that for vitamin D, it's so important. We don't have to find it, grow it, eat it, drink it, breathe it. All we have to do is go outside. And we're too stupid to do that. So now this is why we're sick, is we're not listening to our biology. So going back to the cardiovascular disease. So what happens with people who are low in vitamin D is you have a genetic weak link, and your cardiovascular system for some people could be your genetic weak link. So I described some very elegant experiments in the book showing that arteriosclerosis is very simple. It has nothing to do with cholesterol or calcium. Those are innocent bystanders. The real root of cardiovascular disease, particularly arteriosclerosis, hardening of the arteries, is inflammation. So what happens if you don't have enough vitamin D? Your arteries become inflamed and they become rough and not smooth. So then they capture stuff that's passing by. Calcium and cholesterol are being circuited throughout the body. And if in a person with non-inflamed arteries, it just goes by. People who have inflamed arteries, the cholesterol and calcium will start to form plaques. It's a mechanical process, and it forms plaques. So it has nothing to do, cholesterol has nothing to do with heart disease. Inflammation is what causes heart disease. And if you have a population that is much lower in vitamin D than another one, you're going to get a differential outcome, blacks versus whites. And I can go through each one. So with COVID, now since we had Mr. Superstar Anthony Fauci in the news this week, what a piece of work he is. So the COVID, people who had adverse reactions to getting COVID infections, I'm not talking about the vaccines. They had comorbidities. Do you remember that? Every comorbidity that was linked to an adverse outcome was related to a vitamin D deficiency. So obesity, cardiovascular disease, and age, like we talked about before. Your skin doesn't make as much vitamin D as you get older. So all of those comorbidities are related to vitamin D. And actually in 2020, I wrote an article for Epoch Times in April of 2020, kind of like before kind of as COVID was just kind of incubating. And the point of the article was that we can prevent, I looked at the Spanish flu of 1918 and saw that the second wave of the Spanish flu was a lot worse than the first because it occurred in the winter. So the prediction is that the next wave of COVID is going to be worse because it's going to occur when vitamin D levels are dropping in the population. So where there's going to be a lot more deaths and so on. So the recommendation was, hey, build up your vitamin D stores now before we get a vaccine. And, I expected a vaccine to be a real thing, not what we got. But unfortunately, that prediction came true. There was a huge spike in deaths with the second wave of COVID. So it's
And
all
I
related to
still am
vitamin D.
not convinced by the death numbers, by the way, because there have been incidents in which the deaths were recorded as COVID, but they could actually be attributed to something else, which is, kind of what you're saying with the comorbidities. Hey, I wanted to back up a little bit on the cholesterol. And one of the hypotheses I've heard is that the cholesterol comes in kind of as, like a firefighter to help smooth over those rough interiors of the arteries. I don't know, just a thought. And then, of course, when that's discovered to be a component of the plaques, then it's blamed
Right.
rather than, recognized as something to mitigate the problem.
Yeah, that's similar to how I describe it in the book. So there's a car accident, which is the inflammation of the artery, and then you have cholesterol and calcium as innocent bystanders who just get sucked into the mess, and they're blamed for the accident. So the solution to heart disease, to most of it, is increase your vitamin D level. It's very simple. Inflammation is the root of most chronic disease. And we can talk about things like Alzheimer's. We can talk about multiple sclerosis. We can talk about aging broadly defined. Anything you want to talk about. Obesity. Some people think obesity is an aberrant immune response that feeds on itself. So what do you want to talk about?
Well, how much can you store up over the summer? And I'm sure it depends on your location, but what would be the best, like if you were out in the sun plenty, not burning at all, how long could that last you into the winter? Not that you'd want to just stop going outside altogether, but.
Not very long.
Okay.
So yeah, in the book I describe how if you if you live above the 37th parallel, which
Where's
is
that?
in the U.S., it's from about Atlanta to in between Los Angeles and San Francisco. So if you just kind of draw a line that way, that's the 37th parallel. So after October 15th, no one can make cutaneously generated vitamin D above the 37th parallel because of the angle of the sun.
Really?
So the angle is too steep. So the UVB rays that are from 290 to 315 nanometers bounce off the atmosphere. So there's no way to make any cutaneously generated vitamin D. Other rays come through. I mean, you could still get a sunburn from the UVA rays, but you're not going to make any more vitamin D. So after that, so I call that the vitamin D winter. So it goes from October 15th until March 15th above the 37th parallel. And the further north you are, or south, depending on which part of the world you're in, the longer it's going to take until you can actually make more vitamin D. So to specifically answer your question, somebody who doesn't go into the sun at all during the summer, they have no stores at all.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a sun person like me, I go into the sun. I'm not afraid of the sun. I've got I love it. I can actually feel it. And this is before I wrote the book. Somebody like me who's going to have a very high amount of store, even though I'm not fat, it's a fat soluble vitamin. If I don't supplement after being in the sun, I'd say at least an hour a day minimum. I'm in Vermont. It's not very sunny a lot of times, but generally speaking, if I don't supplement, by the time January 1st runs around, my tank's gone. I'm out. I have no stores at all. So I need to supplement. So what I do is when I was 44 years old, which is when I started taking high dose vitamin D, I've averaged 8,000 international units a day for 23 years. No adverse effects, only perfect health. I feel like I'm in my 30s, if not younger. We can talk about longevity in a minute, but I recently, since the book came out, um, people were asking me, gee, I'm 67. You seem extremely young. And, what do you think vitamin D has anything to do with it? And I said, yeah. Well, how do you know? So what I did is I have no reason to go to the doctor anymore. And I might get a checkup occasionally, but it's not something that I feel I have to do. So what I did is I went to LabCorp and had blood panels drawn, and I plugged all those numbers into Claude, and I asked, which is an AI model, and I said, okay, here's my chronological age. Based on these blood values, testosterone, albumin, C-reactive protein, which is a measure of general inflammation in your arteries, based on the norms that are out there, what's my biological age? And it came back 51. So
Nice.
the three main things that it looked at were high sensitive CRP, testosterone level, and albumin, which is your body's ability to make protein. All of those were in were decades younger than I am chronologically. So at 51, in the 23-year period, that's 23 chronological years since I started taking vitamin D. I'm 67 now. I started 44. I've only aged 7 if I'm biologically 51. So I've started doing a study. I know a lot of people like me were taking high dose vitamin D, 5 to 10,000 for different things, because I've dealt with these people over the years. I tell them my story. They say, oh, I want to do it too. So I've accumulated 18 people who are going to submit their blood work to me. And I'm going to see if it's a trend. My wife, she's been taking it for 19 years, and she has the same pattern. So we may be onto something here as far as longevity. And I'd have a chapter in the book looking at how to age, not just gracefully, but age, like active aging. And the way that I attack aging in the book is we can either look at aging as a passive process that's just related to the passage of time, which there's nothing we can do about. Or we could conceptualize aging as an active process that's related to chronic inflammation that we can control. So anytime you hear inflammation, you think vitamin D, stimulus response.
Okay.
So all of the diseases of aging, neurological disease, all the muscle atrophy, bone health, they're all related to inflammation. What causes inflammation? Lack of vitamin D and immune dysfunction. So I could go through.
Can I interrupt?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. Backing up just a little bit to saying that you would derive no vitamin D benefit after October 15th north of the 37th parallel. I still, just from what I've been learning about circadian fitness, would encourage people to continue to go outside just for a whole host of other reasons, even though they weren't getting the vitamin D. What do you think, Bill?
Yeah, I mean, there's all types of things in sunlight that we don't know. There's nitric oxide, which we know that dilates your blood vessels and makes you feel better. But there's when full spectrum sunlight hits your skin, it makes 10 or 11 compounds that we haven't even named yet.
Right.
And this is when you asked me before, why did you write this book now? Well, it's amazing that in 2026, we know very little about vitamin D, when our bodies are basically vitamin D factories. Our biology is telling us that this is an essential. They call it, it's not a mineral, it's not a nutrient, it's actually a hormone. But I think it defies description in my mind. For now, we'll call it a hormone, because it's made one way, one in one part of the body and affects others. That's the typical classic definition of a hormone. But I think vitamin D is more along the lines of a essential life giver, you know,
Yeah.
on par with water,
Okay.
oxygen, and vitamin D.
Okay.
That's
And
that's how important I think it is.
I also want to emphasize the importance of what you just said, full spectrum light. So no window, no contacts, no glasses. Get your eyes and skin in the game is what I've heard. Hey, Bob, do you have any questions at this time?
I'd have a couple. One is, how does the vitamin D conversion system of your skin kind of relate to the new body subsystem, the interstitial system? Have you looked at that, and is that a valid theory for you? And is it actually the
No,
interstitial that then takes our vitamin D and circulates it better?
it could be, but I think, the discovery of the interstitial a couple years ago was shocking to me about how little we know about things we think we know everything about. I mean, and sunlight and vitamin D are just one of the examples. So, like with the fenbendazole book, we're learning a lot about cancer. No, we don't know anything about cancer. What we know is what we're told we think we should know. So the whole fenbendazole thing was kind of an eye opener as well. But vitamin D, if you just look at how basic it is, you go outside, your skin makes it, and then we tell people, don't go outside, it's bad for you. And then we don't give them compensatory advice to supplement with vitamin D. This is where the conspiracy theory comes in. Do you think that's an accident?
Yeah.
Do you think doctors don't know? Do you think that people think that, high dose vitamin D is going to kill you when our skin makes 10 to 20,000 units in 10 minutes time? The big pharma, their whole book of business is based on vitamin D deficiency. Every every drug that you see advertised on TV that ends in an IB or an AB, monoclonal antibody or kinase inhibitor, is manipulating some form, some aspect of what vitamin D does naturally. So think about an American society. Most people are vitamin D deficient, and the notion of having a genetic weak link that is going to cause that deficiency to express itself differently in different people. So for me, I was lucky. My genetic weak link was psoriasis. It was on my skin. I had a meter. I could actually see how much vitamin D I had to take to get rid of it and keep it away. It was, it was a gift that I had psoriasis. Other people, my wife had ulcerative colitis, which is a little bit nastier. After she saw me with what happened with vitamin D, we were sitting in our living room one day, and I said, rather than do those nasty treatments that she had, why don't you just start taking high dose vitamin D? We actually make our own. We call it Star Power. So, because back 23 years ago, you couldn't really get 5,000 units of vitamin D. So we just had it made custom. So she started taking Star Power, and within 3 to 4 weeks, her symptoms disappeared, and they've been gone since 19 years.
Wow.
So nothing is more convincing than when something works on yourself.
Yeah.
So back to big pharma. You have a population that's chronically vitamin D deficient. That makes for good customers, because chronic disease is a golden goose for big pharma. So you may notice, I don't know if you watch TV, but the past 5-6 years, if you watch the commercials, you think everybody has psoriasis, because not that everybody has psoriasis, it's that they have treatments for it that are very expensive. And they're all just variants of vitamin D. So vitamin D, they can't replicate vitamin D because it's been intelligently designed. It's too complex for big pharma to replicate it, and it's free. You just have to go outside. It's inexpensive if you don't get it. It costs pennies per pill. So I think there's a real, I wouldn't call it a conspiracy, but lack of intellectual curiosity into the effects of telling a society to stay out of the sun and not compensating for the vitamin D that they clearly know is essential for all these biological functions.
Okay, a couple more simple questions from me though. Is the testing of vitamin D levels pretty standard when you get blood work done?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, so for me it was an extra $100, and they use the same vial of blood, and it's it's in the U.S. it's nanograms per milliliter. In Europe it might be a different thing, but it's easy to convert it. But recently the Society of Endocrinology recommended that vitamin D doctors, PCPs, not recommend routine vitamin D tests for their patients,
Okay.
because most people don't need them based on their standard of 30 nanograms per milliliter being sufficient. And fortunately, a little birdie has told me that the powers that be are looking at redoing the US RDA up to 8,000 units per day.
Oh my, nice.
So your body uses 3,500 to 4,000 a day. So I'm throwing out these numbers because it's very easy to understand that we're being put into an artificial deficit by, one, the RDA telling us 600 or 800 units. You get virtually none from food. And if you're told the sun is going to kill you if you go outside, you're going to get none from the sun. And if you don't supplement, you're chronically vitamin D deficient, and you are the breeding ground for a chronic autoimmune disease, whether it be psoriasis, ulcerative colitis, arthritis, multiple sclerosis, and Alzheimer's disease. We can either talk about aging or Alzheimer's. They're two ones that a lot of people are worried about. But if you want to talk about the different aspects of aging, one thing you may notice that as you get older, it's harder and harder to maintain your muscle mass. So you can be a weightlifter, you can be, weekend athlete, but you just kind of get flabby and it's hard to maintain muscle mass. Well, vitamin D, again, the epidemiology is our vitamin D, our ability to make vitamin D decreases, and if we don't supplement it, we're in an unnatural state. The natural state is to be vitamin D replete. So the specific type of muscle fiber that you lose as you get older is called type 2 fast twitch muscle. These are the big fibers. They're the ones that make you look good,
or make you run fast.
Yes. So they're the ballistic fast twitch muscle fibers. Those fibers are highly dependent on adequate vitamin D. So in an environment where there's enough vitamin D, when you work out, it's kind of like use-dependent plasticity. Those will increase. In a vitamin D deficient environment, those selectively atrophy. And what happens as you get older, it's not that people are clumsy or that they trip. They're more likely to trip. As you get older, you're more likely to fall and break your hip for two reasons. One is your bones are more brittle, but the reason why you fall is you lose your fast twitch muscle fibers. So a person with fast twitch muscle fibers doesn't fall. They catch themselves. An older person who doesn't have that capability because their muscles have atrophied and selected specifically the type 2 fast twitch muscle fibers. So the solution is supplement with vitamin D. So then you'll get the use-dependent plasticity. You can build muscle or at least maintain it. You'll have stronger bones and you'll be less likely to fall, break your hip, and die. So that's the anti-aging, how to age gracefully, how to age in an active manner so that you're just not accepting it. So vitamin D is the key.
Bill, are there any downsides or cautions for supplementing with vitamin D?
Not if you can take mega doses meaning millions of IUs, you like taking a whole bottle of vitamin D, you would have to go out of your way to poison yourself. So me, I've averaged 8,000 units over the past 23 years.
Mhm.
No problems with blood work, uh, no nothing. And again, knowing that my skin when I'm young makes these mega doses
Hmm.
of 10 to 20,000 told me that it's BS to be afraid of taking high dose vitamin D. Actually, high dose vitamin D is what prevents most other diseases.
Okay. Hey,
So
I put in the show description, we're going to ask you about, I love this title of one of your chapters, Is Sunscreen the New Margarine? You
yeah,
want to tell us about that?
yeah. So that's actually not my line. It's from a writer, I think it was in Men's Health, and it was years ago where he brought up, is sunscreen the new margarine? So you may recall that when I was a kid, everything was new and different. We had space food sticks and all, cyclamates and all kinds of experimental food that turned out
I'm
to
not
be
familiar.
poisonous.
I'm not familiar with those space
Well,
food sticks.
it's part of the Apollo program. So it
Oh,
was
okay.
space food sticks, astronaut food, Tang.
Uh-huh.
You
Tang,
remember
yeah, that's
Tang
what I was
orange
going to
juice?
say. Uh-huh.
So it was all that time. So part of this nonsense was an attack on dairy. So butter is bad. The saturated fat in butter is bad. So they came up with oleomargarine, which is an industrial byproduct. It's the trans fats in that kill you, whereas the butter, the saturated fats in the butter are actually good for you. So it's the whole idea of something meant to solve a problem actually created a problem much worse than it was trying to solve. So is sunscreen the new margarine? It absolutely is. So sunscreen, if you look at the back of your sunscreen bottle, it says drug facts. Well, why does it say, did you ever wonder why it said, I'm not drinking it. Why is it a drug? Well, when you put it on your skin, it's in your brain in like 30 seconds.
Really?
So
It's picked up
sunscreen,
in the circulatory system.
yeah. So anything that you put on your skin is going to be in systemic circulation pretty quickly. And if you look at the back of Coppertone or any of them that are not mineral based, so zinc oxide and titanium oxide, the ones that stay on your skin that are kind of like the white paste, those are safe.
Like a
They're not
physical
absorbed.
barrier.
Everything else is a neurotoxin. And so sunscreen definitely is causing more trouble than it's solving. It can prevent you from burning, but it does prevent your skin from making vitamin D as well. It's very efficient at that. So yes, sunscreen is the new margarine.
And plus, preventing burning is kind of like cutting the wires to your dashboard in your car. You have a signal of I'm burning, so I need to move into the shade. But if you cut that off at the pass, is that what they say?
Yep.
You don't get that message, and
You're exactly
out
right.
too long.
Yeah, you're exactly right. So despite decades and decades of people slathering on sunscreen, the incidence of melanoma is at the highest it's ever been.
Ugh.
And part of that is there's two components to that. One that won't be recognized by mainstream medicine is the lack of vitamin D. That will not be recognized. Yet there are studies from Sweden and elsewhere showing that vitamin D status predicts melanoma prognosis and outcome. So that you won't hear that anywhere but here. But people get a false sense of security with sunscreen. So they'll put it on and they'll go out on a boat for 5 hours and then they missed a spot. So the spot they missed is beet red. So you're out in the sun a lot longer than you should be because you have a false sense of security. So, and it's the burning, repeated burning, especially burn on top of a burn, that can cause the DNA mutations that then lead to melanomas. But again, fenbendazole works on those things. So there's kind of a theme
Come
here.
full circle, yeah.
Yeah. So, um, but anyway, so that it is sunscreen, and then in the autism chapter, um, how is vitamin D related to autism? Well, so one thing that again, every chapter follows the same recipe. So I look at the epidemiology, and most of these diseases have ramped up since the 1970s, which is the beginning of the sun scare. So now we're in epidemic proportions of autism. So could vitamin D be related to the autism epidemic? There's a lot of moving parts. Could be vaccines, could be diet, nutrition, but an unappreciated factor could be lack of vitamin D and sunscreens. So I can take you through this, since I'm sure a lot of people would be interested. So when a pregnant woman puts on sunscreen, it not only goes in her brain, it goes into her baby's brain as well. So you have critical periods of fetal development for different brain regions. And all neurons, particularly Purkinje cells in the cerebellum, have receptors for vitamin D. And Purkinje cells in the cerebellum are preferentially shown to be malformed in human autistic brains. So what could be the mechanism? And this is the part of the brain I used to study as a neuroscientist. So I looked at some of the, I cataloged some of the behaviors that happen that are controlled by this part of the cerebellum, the midline cerebellum: learning, memory, emotion, exploratory behaviors. So I'm kind of like the pioneer on this part of the brain. So, and this is how these things are coming full circle. So how is vitamin D involved in autism? Two ways. One, when the mother puts on sunscreen, she's perhaps impairing her baby's brain ability to fend off toxins that a non-affected child might be able to fend off. So the other toxins would be vaccine insults, sickness insults that the mother may have, all the different things that are kind of tangentially related to autism but not proven. With lack of, so a mother who is vitamin D starved, her baby is vitamin D starved as well. And there's a whole host of ontological studies showing that vitamin D is essential for normal cellular development in the brain. Not necessarily cells being there or not being there, but the microanatomy, how the synapses are all connected. So you could have a two-phase problem. And then to the extent that sunscreen is a neurotoxin, you're kind of barraging a developing brain with multiple insults. And the part of the brain that seems to be affected is this midline part of the cerebellum called the vermis. And that's the part of the brain that I used to study. So what's interesting in autistic brains, that part of the brain seems to be underdeveloped. Like on gross examination, it looks smaller. And the particular behaviors that characterize autistic syndrome kind of match that part of the brain. So it's a very complex brain: learning, memory, emotion. But there's a flip side to the vermis. There's a syndrome called the Williams syndrome. And what's interesting about these kids is they are hypersocial. Like they're the opposite, behaviorally opposite of a kid on the autism spectrum.
What's it called?
Outgoing, highly verbal. They've got a cocktail party personality. And if you look at their midline cerebellum, it's overdeveloped.
What's the name of that syndrome again?
Williams.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, Bill, we have to wrap it up here. I want to say I'm encouraging people to get the book. You discuss heliotherapy for one thing, the medical use of sunlight. And ladies and gentlemen, it's the Sunlight Solution. And also you can find William Supple at starpower.substack.com. And Bill, what's your fenbendazole Substack?
Oh, that's fenbendazole.substack.com.
Thank you. Did I say it the wrong way?
Just Fenben.
I always want to reverse the beginning of that last syllable with the previous letter.
Right.
Let's see. How much time do we have left, Nathan, till sign off? 2 minutes? Okay. Give us a 45-second something that I should have covered and didn't think of, Bill.
Let's talk about Alzheimer's.
Okay.
The concept of neuroinflammation. So inflammation can happen in your arteries, on your skin, in your colon, and also in your brain. So Alzheimer's is a neuroinflammatory condition. So if you don't have enough vitamin D, normally when you have cells die, there's a cleanup crew that comes in and removes them.
Yeah.
If that's vitamin D related, those are called macrophages, part of the immune system. If you don't have adequate vitamin D, that junk stays in your brain. And what it does, it's just not, it becomes an immune system problem where it spreads and affects other neighboring cells. So you'll get senescent cells, and then you'll get zombie cells that are, the spreading depression and then the spreading death, where you're losing these cells that happen in people who don't have enough vitamin D. So make sure you get enough vitamin D.
Yeah.
These are things that are decades. You prevent all these things. You can't cure them. You prevent them.
Yes.
And that's why you have to start now.
Yes.
Well, I know what I'm rushing out and doing right now. Thanks again, Bill.
Thank you.
you. So great to have you back, Bill. Thanks for joining us too, Bob. And ladies and gentlemen, join us next week for Chris Downey, creator of VaxCalc. It's an app. And I'd like to thank our excellent producer at the station, Nathan Miller. I get to see him right across the room today. Appreciate all his work behind the scenes, getting us set up and running smoothly. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for spending your time with us today on Informed Life Radio at 1150 a.m. KKNW and CHD TV. This is your host, Lisa Templeton, signing off for the week. Here's to embracing your informed life. Have a good weekend, everybody.
Informed Choice Washington is a nonprofit organization that advocates for healthy immunity, medical freedom, and fully informed medical consent. The right to make medical choices without coercion is fundamental to our civil liberties and a basic principle in all human rights declarations. To learn more, tune in each Friday from 4 to 5 p.m. to an Informed Life Radio and visit the website informedchoicewa.org. It's time to take a stand for medical freedom. Go to informedchoicewa.org today.
Did you know that solutions containing iodine can inactivate viruses in the nose and throat in 15 seconds? And hydrogen peroxide can do it in under 30 seconds. Decades of studies, including many conducted during COVID, have shown that properly prepared and used nasal spray and gargling solutions can reduce your risk of infection, reduce viral load, reduce symptoms, and reduce transmission of viruses. To learn more, go to healthyimmunitynow.org and check out the EFU Challenge. Why spread fear and infection when nature provides solutions? Go to healthyimmunitynow.org today.
The information contained in this episode is for informational purposes only. No material is intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment.